Government waste, fraud, and abuse are major issues, serious issues, but one author takes a different approach to exposing some of the truths behind them. In the book, The Weed Agency, a comic tale of federal bureaucracy without limits, Jim Geraghty details a mock history of the Department of Agriculture's most secretive and vital agency, the USDA Agency of Invasive Species. And here, invading our screen now, discussing his new book, the man whose columns you read at National Review Online, the man who hopes you buy the book, The Weed Agency. Why, it's Jim Geraghty coming to us from Washington, D.C. Jim, we're so happy to have you today on America's Forum.
Well, Congressman, thanks very much for having me.
Now, as I recall, and I believe I will credit Lynn Martin, the first time I heard the line, she was a cabinet secretary, and she said, I don't know what your personal theology is, but if you want to live forever, just come back as a government agency because you just continue to stay around. Was it that thinking that inspired you to write the book?
Pretty much. My good editors over at Random House, Dana Perino, the former White House press secretary, and Sean Desmond had this concept, and they kind of wanted me to develop it, which is the idea of, we see federal bureaucracy, we see these federal programs. They start out as a small pilot program, and then they find, oh, they're desperately underfunded. We need some sort of grander, we need to expand the funding to it, and it grows and it expands, and it's very difficult to get rid of, very difficult to uproot. And in real life, there's a federal interagency working group on invasive species, which includes about 8 or 9 different federal agencies, including NASA, by the way. So I suppose they're on the lookout for space weeds or something like that. And it's started, I'm sad to say for you and I, it's actually started during the Reagan years, this interagency working group. But it's a metaphor because it grows, it expands, and it's very difficult to uproot. So it's just kind of the idea of taking this idea, writing a fictional history, or as Dan Rather used to say, fake but accurate. Throughout the book, I put in real life examples of really a ludicrous spending, kind of this whole philosophy of spend everything you can by the end of the fiscal year, so that you can then turn around and say, well, we're doing so well, but we really need more money next year to do an even better job, and things like that. And the idea of having money left over in your budget at the end of the year is the worst possible sin you could have within many halls of the federal government. So. Also how they escape accountability, how they manage to wriggle out of scandals. You probably will identify with one of the protagonists, a Reagan aide who goes and runs for Congress and who's just basically, the Weed Agency kind of turns into his white whale, and he kind of becomes Captain Ahab. He's going to eliminate this thing if it's the last thing he ever does. A little bit of Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill and then finding one setback after another. I compared him to Ahab, and somebody said, well, isn't he more like Wile E. Coyote? So he does have a little bit of futility in his efforts. So, but it kind of is how Washington works. Yeah.
And in terms of this, Jim Geraghty, I would imagine the characters you assembled, I won't say fake but accurate, but a compendium of different characters and different personalities you may have run across during your days in D.C. there. Do you have a favorite character you put into this book and that you lavish more attention on than the others when you were writing this?
Sure, yeah. In addition to covering kind of the high-level fights between members of Congress and the person running the agency, I also wanted to put something like kind of the ground eye level and kind of talk about who are the kind of people who go to work for the federal government, because despite what you might hear in a couple of corners of the conservative movement, they're not all bad people. A lot of them are very good people. They generally go to Washington because they want to make a difference, they want to make the world a better place, and they tend to enter the federal workforce with a great deal of idealism and energy and excitement. And then bit by bit, day by day, year by year, it kind of gets ground out of them by the process of the federal bureaucracy and a kind of a culture of complacency throughout the place. That they're not interested in new ideas. They're not interested in changing the way they work. They're very slow to embrace new technologies and things like that. And a lot of young federal workers who I kind of came to Washington with and kind of were hanging around with would just talk about the place and feel like they were in a time machine. The computers were old, the structure was old, and nothing ever seems to change. Let me tell you, it's not easy to write a novel about a place where nothing ever seems to change. So the lesson is that usually within like 3 years, people who go to join the federal workforce reach the point of either, all right, I'm staying, I'm going to be a lifer, or I can't stand it, this place is driving me crazy. So I have a young woman who comes to Washington in the early 90s named Ava, who is full of this sense of, I'm going to make the world a better place. I'm going to work for the Department of Agriculture. And she finds out that actually no, or it's much harder to make the world a better place. You know, I think a lot of people come to Washington, and perhaps your experience in Congress may kind of mirror that. You come to Washington determined to change the world, and oftentimes the world changes you. And kind of it's a question of, what do you do when all of your ideas of how the world works and how you can make things happen aren't as applicable as you thought, and it's a lot harder than you thought. And you know, why Republicans and conservatives have had such a hard time of limiting government spending over the past 3 decades.
Well, you have taken a comic approach to a very serious topic, and it is one that I eagerly await to read. I'm going to pore over every word and see if I spot somebody I know in the weed agency. But
There's a good chance of that, yeah.
Let's shift topics, and this is very serious. Something you've addressed in National Review and National Review Online. Major concerns surrounding this deal bringing Bo Bergdahl back to the United States for the Taliban 5. We've got about a minute and a half. Can you give us your reaction to this deal and your major concerns, Jim Geraghty?
Sure. I mean, look, there's a wide variety of issues here, but I think the one that we're all kind of focusing on now these days is that there are now, I believe, 9 former members of his platoon, counted by my colleagues at NRO, all basically offering variations of him being a deserter, as they said, at best a deserter and at worst a traitor. Now, I understand that this isn't perfect knowledge and that he hasn't had a chance to defend himself yet, and we all believe in the concept of innocent until proven guilty. But right now there is no alternative explanation for this guy disappearing, not taking his gun, not taking his vest, not taking his night vision goggles, leaving a note, according to the front page of the New York Times, not some crazy right-wing blogger here, and then allegedly seeking out the Taliban while he's out there. So all of this information coming out here is very disturbing, very troubling. And then the thought that we gave up 5 really dangerous terrorists and put them back out on the street. Well, they're in Qatar, and I believe that there's a good chance, you know, they have to understand that the reputation of the Qataris is on what happens to these guys. If these guys go out and kill Americans again, there is going to be just a volcanic fury amongst the American people that we had these guys safely locked up, and then it turns out we let them go in the name of some sort of really idealistic notion of the Obama administration.
If it weren't so serious, it might be a situation ripe for satire. In another venue, you offer satire with your new novel about the weed agency. Jim Geraghty from National Review Online, we thank you for your time, and we look forward to talking to you again real soon. It's great to see you, and as I said, I look forward to reading your book with interest. There's more to come on America's Forum.